I shall be reading from Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10, and from the New King James Version. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maids walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse to you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the baby for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water."
Thank you, Mom. Today I'm going to talk from the topic Room to Dance. And I was thinking about this text, and it reminded me of today being Mother's Day. How many of us remember the days of drawing a beautiful card or picking some dandelions or something and giving them to Mom for Mother's Day? Or maybe we just made an effort to be extra nice on that day. Or maybe you even tried to cook or clean up, or as you got older, took Mom out to dinner or did something special to show Mom how much you appreciated her. People have been doing this for many years, even before the United Kingdom started the tradition that every fourth Sunday in Lent, they called it Mothering Sunday, because that was the Sunday that the Christians would return to their home church. And over time, that became a secular celebration, and people brought flowers and gifts to their mothers. Or Julia Ward Howe, who campaigned for world peace in 1870, and she promoted Mother's Peace Day. That would be every June 2nd. But then in 1905, when Anne Jarvis, who following the death of her mother, conceived Mother's Day as a way of honoring the sacrifices that mothers had made for their children. You know, I knew some of this history of Mother's Day, and I knew what it was like to say Happy Mother's Day to my mom. But I didn't realize how much I did not know about being a mother until 8 years ago, when a little girl came into my life along with her mother. Ever since that day, I asked that little girl if I could marry her mother, and she replied to me, "I'll get back to you." Ever since those times, I came to understand that motherhood is something different. Motherhood is something not that easy. And I enjoy being a mom now, or as Cameron calls me, Mom, because she has 3. She's got her birth mother, she's got the mother who adopted her, and then here comes me to be number 3. And then on top of that, she's got grandmothers and a lot of older women who just see her and treat her as their child. I've come to understand that, not to take anything away from birth mothers, I've come to understand that we can all take responsibility for mothering and doing the best we can do to care for and to protect the children. Our text for today highlights that such a situation. The scripture comes out of the book of Exodus, a very powerful narrative that tells of the transformation of a social situation from oppression to freedom, not just for the characters in the story, but also in the lives of the audience that heard this story. Scholars believe the book of Exodus in its present form was actually finalized around the 6th century BCE, during or soon after the Babylonian exile. This was a context in which the Jerusalem establishment had been terminated, and foreign Babylonian and Persian powers were governing. This means that the people of Israel were going through a period of acute crisis. So being in that sort of situation in crisis where your whole life had been turned upside down and you felt no control and you were being oppressed, this Exodus story would have been about a song of liberation, liberation from Pharaoh in the story as a model or even a promise that liberation could perhaps happen from their present oppressor, the Babylonians and the Persians. These people who heard this text in the 6th century BCE would have heard about the covenant that God made with their ancestors, and they would have heard a reminder of the laws they were meant to follow. They would have heard all of this even though they were in a foreign land. And so the story all started out with a powerful story of mothering. The story goes that a Levite woman gave birth to a male child, a child that was born with a death sentence already on his head due to an insecure Pharaoh who was trying to cut off the male population of Israelite slaves because he was afraid that they would side with his enemies if there was an invasion. So all of the Israelite male babies were to be drowned in the Nile immediately after their birth. Sounds kind of like how in our present day, how Black and brown male babies are unsafe, often marked for death or incarceration by some in society who are afraid of demographic shifts. But this story about how one mother hid her little boy for 3 months, and when he reached a point where she could no longer safely protect him, she made a little watertight basket and put him in the Nile in the hopes that someone would find him and save him. And sure enough, Pharaoh's daughter saw the child in the basket and recognized it as one of the Hebrew children. And even though her father would have wanted it dead, she decided to take him as her own son. But that was after his sister arranged that his birth mother would be the one that would nurse him and raise him. The text says the princess named the baby Moses, thinking that that meant drew him out of the water. But some scholars say that that was a misinterpretation of the name, and the real Hebrew meaning of the word Moses was son. Look at how many women were involved in saving of that little boy child named son. The birth mother, the sister, the princess's maids, the princess, all of them took him as their son in spite of the fear of the Pharaoh and the Pharaoh's disdain for the Hebrews. They all looked at the little boy and took care of him. It takes cooperation and allies to save our sons. As we look at the text, it shows us examples of what it means to be a good mother. Each of the women had a level of love and concern for a baby that came into the world under a shadow of a death sentence. That love kept their focus on the child no matter what. That love was greater than the fear of being found out by the Pharaoh. That love was strong enough to let go of what was and do what was best for the child if they had to let go of it. Love is a foundational characteristic of motherhood. Now, I recognize that there are mothers who either don't know what love is or just don't know how to show it. Often that's because they didn't have love in their own life. There are also abusive mothers. They would have let the baby die if they hadn't been the one to kill it. There are narcissistic mothers whose life is all about them. And even when the child is there, the child is controlled or ignored by their narcissistic mother. Because with a narcissistic mother, the only focus is on themselves, and they only care about the child in as much as the child is a reflection on them. But thankfully, the mothers in our story and most of the mothers in our lives showed a more positive quality. I read somewhere that the qualities of a good mother include that she is loving, patient, She's a role model. She's consistent. She's organized. She's respectful. She's supportive and encouraging. She's forgiving. She acknowledges flaws, and she is flexible. Good mothers do the best they can for their children. And even God was presented as a mother in scripture in many cases. For example, in Isaiah 66, which is another passage that was written for the same population of people of Israel during their time of bondage. And in that case, it was God who said, as a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you. You shall be comforted in Jerusalem. I read Jodi Picoult said, 24/7. Once you sign on to be a mother, that's the only shift they offer. And I also read that motherhood is a choice you make every day to put someone else's happiness and well-being ahead of your own, to teach the hard lessons, to do the right thing, even when you're not sure what the right thing is, and to forgive yourself over and over again for doing the wrong thing. Mothers may not always do the right thing, but a good mother does the best she can. Like what we saw in the life of Moses, motherhood is not confined to the people who birthed us. Sometimes, for one reason or another, based on their own history, based on something physical, something psychological, or based on the fact that they're no longer physically in this realm, our mothers, our physical mothers, our birth mothers aren't always the ones who can take care of us. The title mother is just that. It's a title. It's not just a title. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's not just a title, it's a role. This week I was putting together what they call a stakeholder list for one of my projects at work. And it had two headings on this list. It had first the name of the person, and then it had two other columns. And for some reason, I had to really think about what the difference was between those two columns. On one column, the title said title. On the other column, the title said role. And there's a major difference between those terms. A title is simply a label. It's what they call you. It's what your label of your job function is. But a role is actually the function you fill. The role is what you actually do. Often we get focused on titles in life, but we don't always fulfill the role. Unfortunately, there are people who have the title of mother, but they don't do a great job of fulfilling the role. I'm not referring to the things that mothers do inadvertently. It was Jill Churchill who said, there's no way to be a perfect mother and a million ways to be a good one. When it comes to mothering, all of us can fill the role, even though we don't have the title. Even men can fill the role of a mother. Men can be supportive and patient and consistent and unconditionally loving. The role is more important than the title. Fortunately, I've been blessed with a wonderful and loving and supportive mother, and I'm very grateful for her. But I've also had other people in my life who filled that role. I've had Mrs. Ebb, who filled the role when she gave me a place to live when I needed it. I've had Aunt Margie, who fills the role when she prays for me. My sister used to fill that role when she saw more good in me than I saw in myself. My cousin Vincent filled that role when he used to encourage me. And at times, my friends fill that role even today. Over the years, I've even filled that role. Every day, I'm reminded of a group of young people. I used to be their pastor, and I loved them like a mother when they were like 8 and 10 years old. When I was their pastor, it's kind of funny, I got an ankh, an Egyptian symbol for life. I got that tattooed on my thigh. And I told them every time I see it, I'd pray for them. Now, I can't say I do it every time, but many times to this day, I pray for those former children who are now productive and positive 35, 36, 37-year-olds. And some of them have children of their own. It was Barbara Kingsolver who said, "But kids don't stay with you if you do it right. It's the one job where the better you are, the more surely you won't be needed in the long run." This week, I read 2 essays. The first was Following Naked Dancing and Long Dreaming. And it was from a Korean author named Chung Him. And the second was Alice Walker's In Search of My Mother's Garden. In the first essay, the young woman writes of going from being a young girl who was embarrassed by her mother because her mother would strip down and sing and dance near a lake, dance like she was crazy and sing out loud. But as the young girl got older, she came to understand what her mother was going through, that her mother sang by the lake and danced by the lake because she was going through life living as a typical Korean woman who served her husband and followed the rules, although her spirit clearly wanted to be free. And at the end of her mother's life, she discovered that that wasn't even her birth mother. Her birth mother had to give her up as a baby and lived her life in poverty because she never married. Even though she had not seen her daughter, the birth mother knew quite a bit about the child and loved her all along, even though she had to let her go. And in Alice Walker's essay, she highlights how her mother, as well as many other African-American women, had to focus on working in the field and doing chores and doing other things when their spirit really longed to express their innate creativity. Alice Walker also came to recognize that what was in her mother was this beauty and this creativity. And for her mother, it didn't come out in painting or poetry or anything like that. It showed up in the way she cared for her garden. You know, we go through life not understanding our mothers sometimes because we don't know everything our mothers have been through and what they're going through. Throughout the years, mothers have sacrificed to make a life for their children. Some have stayed in abusive marriages. And even in this pandemic, we can see how mothers have had to sacrifice for their children to provide childcare or educational assistance. We can look at the job losses and the rise of psychological issues. All of these things have impacted mothers during this pandemic. You know, sometimes mothers need some mothering. Toni Morrison said, "Grown don't mean nothing to a mother. A child is a child. They get bigger, older, but grown, in my heart, it don't mean a thing." You know, even if we don't have biological children, even if it's physiologically impossible, we all have mothering to do. There are things that need to be done out of love and concern for the future of all of our children. We need to be concerned about things like global warming or racial injustice or LGBTQ plus, especially these days, trans young people issues. We should be concerned about gender equality or democracy or police reform because, like Moses, we all have sons that need to be saved. We ought to be concerned about peace. The role of the mother drives us to vote, to lobby, to inform, and to care. We do it out of love for somebody's child, even if the child is you. Alice Walker said, "My mother had handed down respect for the possibilities and the will to grasp them." I'm glad for the awareness that so much is possible. We have hope that love still will win in our lifetime. Like the Israelites who initially heard our text for today, we too can remember the love that mothers provide to us. First of all, that mother who we call God, who comforts us by God's presence and gives us the will to act, directed and empowered by God's love. So let's be grateful for those who wear the label of mother today. Give them all the honor they're due. Then be thankful for those who played the role of mother in our lives. Think about the children in our world and in your circle of influence. And like the mother of Moses, like his sister Miriam, like Pharaoh's daughter, let's do all we can do for the good of all the children, whether we birth them or not. Let's work towards a world where the mothers and the children can dance. Thank you for listening.